Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode 120, with today's guest, Robert Gerrish.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
My name's Adam Franklin, and you are listening to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. I'm joined today again by my co-host and friend, Toby Jenkins. How are you today, Tobes?
Good, thanks, Ads.
Good stuff. This is the show for people who love marketing on the web. You'll be taken behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments. We'll look at the good, the bad, and even the ugly. We confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works. So the show is brought to you by our book, Web Marketing That Works. And if you want to get your hands on the 33 free marketing templates that go with it, you can access those at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. And of course, Tobes, we do have our Web Marketing 2-day bootcamp coming up in North Sydney, which is on March the 16th and 17th. So if you're in Australia and you'd like to get along to that, Tobes and I will be running that live in person over 2 days, and we'll be covering the key concepts from our book, and attendees will walk away with a documented web strategy and also a 90-day action plan of how to implement everything that you learn in those 2 days. So look, if you're a beginner, it's a great place to start. That said, if you're intermediate or advanced and you've already got the foundations in place, this boot camp will be very good because you can fill in some of the gaps that you might have, and we'll be revealing some of the cutting edge stuff that we've been experimenting with and revealing what is actually working really well right now for our business. Okie dokes. So today's guest, Robert Gerrish. Tobes, he is a local down here in Sydney. He's up the road at Vaucluse, and it was nice to catch up with him recently. We first met last year at the We Are podcast conference on the Gold Coast, and I've actually followed his work for quite a while. He runs a business called Flying Solo, which is focused on solo entrepreneurs, typically who've been in business for a little while, so not startups. And he's a lovely gentleman. He's written a book also called Flying Solo, and he is the man for today's show.
So what's in store for us today?
Well, Tobes, there's plenty in store. Some of the things that I'm excited about listeners hearing very shortly is his transition from a one-person coaching business to a content-based business. And if you think about it, that's kind of been quite similar to our journey at Bluewire, in that in the early days we were a full service, we were a service-based company building websites for people and helping them with their ongoing updates and social media management and everything else like that. But over the years, as we started to publish templates and blog articles and now podcasts, we've become much more a content-based business where we can then sell products and everything else off the back of that. So it's very cool to hear his story because he started long before it was even called blogging. So he's been in this content game for a long time and he's got some really cool things to share. So with that, how about we head over to the show?
Sounds good.
My name's Adam Franklin, and on the line I have Robert Gerrish from Flying Solo. How's things, Robert?
Very good, Adam. Thank you. Nice to be talking with you.
So let's talk about your business journey, the most recent business. So I saw your presentation at the We Are podcast conference, and you covered some interesting stories from the early parts of your business journey. But the part that I'm particularly fascinated by is the Flying Solo part of your journey. And so did that start as the book or did that start as the blog? Can you talk us through those early days?
Yeah, sure. Started? Well, look, blogs didn't exist when we started. So the name hadn't been, kind of captured and no one was talking blogs. It was at that time, it was sort of Portal. Portal was the name for a place where you kind of hosted a number of articles and started to, place content on various topics. So it started actually with the book. Well, it started kind of prior to that. It started really with me, when I ran a small sort of one-person coaching and consulting business, I had very good fortune to get a nice big expose on ABC Four Corners. They were doing a big show on new sort of work practices, and coaching was one of the ones that they focused on. And delightfully, through a nice twist of fate, they chose me as their sort of guinea pig. So they filmed me and they filmed some of my clients. And in enough to cut a very long story short, it resulted in my business kind of exploding. I had so much, my phone just didn't stop ringing. And being a marketing man from sort of way back, I realized that, I was onto something here, and I just needed to work out exactly kind of what it was I was onto. So after working flat out for a few months, really just coaching so many people as a consequence of this publicity, I sat down and I worked out the people that I really enjoyed at working with, the people I really resonated with, the people that kind of responded well to the work that I was doing. And lo and behold, those people were all people working by themselves. So being a marketer, I absolutely saw the niche there, and I rushed out and registered flying-solo.com.au because domains were just sort of starting up. This was in 1998, 99. So I registered the name Flying Solo. And as a marketing man, realizing that was my niche, I started to do everything with a solo business focus. So I started writing articles and submitting them to newspapers. You remember those things? And I ended up happily getting a regular column in the Daily Telegraph and in a couple of business magazines. So the whole sort of niche space kind of grew. And at that time, then I got a phone call from Allen and Unwin, the publisher, saying, would you write a book and would you call it Flying Solo? So again, that's like a marketer's dream, that somebody rings you saying, will you write a book? And what's more, will you use your brand name as the name of the book? So I said, well, yes, actually, I will do that. So I started writing the book. And at that time, Jane and I just had our young son had been born. And I was very sort of involved and wanted to be very involved around my son. So I found that time was slipping by and I really wasn't sort of getting to grips with this book. So by then I'd made good friends with a lovely woman called Sam Leader. And Sam had just started a writing business. And so I said to Sam, approached Sam and said, look, hey, would you like to co-write a book? I'll be the old sort of salty dog and you can be the newbie. And together we can do sort of, all aspects of running, starting and growing a solo business. Sam said, yes, publisher was fine, happy with us co-writing it. So that's what we did. We wrote the book. And then as a consequence of writing the book together over the period of about a year, we really did enjoy working together, and portals were taking off. So we decided that we'd build some sort of business. And I'd had this idea about, a one-stop shop for anybody starting a solo business. So we moved Flying Solo very much into the kind of portal space. We put lots of articles on there. Then other people approached us and said, hey, could I put my articles on there as well? And, so it all began. That's basically how we got started. And then the actual phrase blogging, the term blogging came sometime later, but that's how we started, literally just the two of us writing. Then other people approached us and said, hey, can I write for you? And, the rest is history. That was we've been going in that sort of format now since 2000.
And so you say you started doing one-on-one personal coaching, and obviously then you got stuck into the content. You wrote the book, you did the blog or the portal back in the early days. How did you divvy up your time? Did you go from like 100% coaching and then gradually started writing articles, or what did that look like?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. That's a point that I find to this day I still talk a great deal about, is how to transition and how to kind of juggle your work. Personally, I guess the important thing that I should make clear is that when I started Flying Solo, it was always intended to be very much a lifestyle business. That is, a business that suited the life that I personally wanted to live. And I had recently got out of a reasonably sort of serious, I suppose, kind of career in marketing. And I really wanted to change the pace of my work, wanted to change the location of my work. I wanted to be more agile, more adaptable, be able to work kind of anywhere and everywhere. And indeed, that's very much the kind of heartland of our community today, are people that are growing a lifestyle business. So we're not a community that's full of lots of young sort of techie startups. We're much more people in the Gen X baby boom age range, a lot of them, people that are running businesses that fit beautifully into their life. So it's obviously very important to me when I started that I kind of walk the talk and practice what I preach. So I've always been very clear on how I want to work, how I divvy up my days, how I spend my time. So when I started initially, I was still doing some consulting. So I was working mainly with kind of small creative businesses, sort of helping them work out their positioning and work out their USP and just generally, get their businesses moving. So I was still doing some of that. I used to coach. Initially, I was coaching sort of 3 days a week. And then the rest of the time I was writing. So what I tended to do was I would always, in the early days, I'd spend at least 2 days a week marketing, in inverted commas, my business. And marketing might take the form of writing, presenting. I do a lot of presenting and used to do a lot more, networking, all that kind of stuff. So I would do at least a couple of days a week of that, and then kind of 3 days a week of kind of head down in the business. And to this day, I still work on quite a similar model. I mean, now I'm actually back doing some writing. I'm writing a long sort of detailed course that we're putting together. So I write solidly for 2 days a week, our office in town for 2 days a week. And then for 1 day a week, I'm recording podcasts and going for long walks and pontificating and pondering. So, yeah, that's kind of how it works. So I think it's important, I found it important anyway, to delineate very clearly what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. It's very easy, particularly if you're working on your own, to kind of wake up, turn your computer on and go to the nearest sort of fire that's going on. And the next thing you know, you've burned up a whole day doing that sort of stuff. So I've always been pretty regimented personally in how I work. Within Flying Solo now, we have a group of us. There's 7 or 8 of us that work within the business, and we all work in different locations. We come together on a sort of group chat. So we have very clear roles and responsibilities. We know who does what and when they're working and, what they're working on. So I think structure is important, and it's very important, I believe, particularly with a very small business. Which sounds a little bit sort of counterintuitive, but I just think it is so necessary to be clear. What am I doing? When am I doing it? What are my priorities?
There's an interesting quote from Vern Harnish, who's a previous guest on the show. His take is that routine sets you free.
Yeah, totally. And that's a great quote. And it's so true. We bang on a fair bit at Flying Solo about having, procedures manuals and policies. And when you talk about these things, you can see people's eyes clouding over sometimes thinking, my God, I thought I'd escaped all that. But in fact, having a procedures manual, having a clear picture of how you do what you do is unbelievably liberating. Because then if you want to go away, if you want to take a break, if you want to step away from your work, you've got all the the details there of how you do it. You can hand it to somebody else. Also, what I used to find, particularly this may be interesting too, when I was doing my coaching business, and when coaching was an important sort of part of my revenue, obviously what would happen is every now and again, I wanted to make myself accessible. Every now and again, the phone would ring and I might be head down sort of writing an article or doing something else, doing some tech stuff or something, and the phone would ring. So what I used to keep on my desktop on my computer was just a little sort of post-it note that could immediately get me into my coaching frame of mind. I also had one for media because in those days, media were, well, it's different to how it is now. There's a lot of sort of printed publications. And for a while, I was getting a lot of phone calls from media about certain things. And again, I needed to be able to switch into kind of media mode really fast. So I keep these little post-it notes on my desk. And if a coaching client called up or a media person called up, a kind of script in front of me, something not exactly a script, but something that could just take me from kind of head down writing about, who knows what, time management or overwhelm or finance or something, could take me straight into the kind of persona of a coach or a media commentator. And to this day, I still find those kind of things extremely, extremely useful.
I like that. And so did you actually transition completely out of the coaching side of things and have transitioned into earning revenue through the Flying Solo website?
Yes.
And you still maintain your 2 days of content, but did the revenue switch from?
Yeah, how that kind of went was quite interesting. So it's sort of, the whole process was quite fun because so when I started coaching, I initially was just coaching on a Saturday morning. And I was doing it kind of pro bono with friends. And after I'd done some coach training, which I did with a big US company, I then started just sort of, getting my toes in the water. So I was doing that just on a Saturday morning for a few hours with people that I knew. I always did my work over the phone. Then that transitioned into, after the ABC exposure, transitioned into a couple of days a week. So I was doing a couple of days a week of writing, a couple of days a week of coaching, and then kind of 1 day a week, maybe with a bit of consulting. And then gradually the coaching took over more and more, stopped the consulting kind of pretty well altogether. And then and this was over a period of time, I guess, and that's quite delightful. I'd love to say it was all absolutely strategized and orchestrated, and of course it wasn't. We didn't really know what we were getting into with Flying Solo. We just knew that there's an awful lot of people out there that needed somewhere to connect and needed someone that really understood and could talk to the sort of challenges and problems that they might have in their solo business. But initially, we didn't think at all about revenue. And then, of course, what started to happen quite delightfully was that we got a fair bit of traction, we got a fair bit of traffic, and then, the way these things happened, an ad agency knocked on our door one day and said, "Hey, have you thought of running some ads on your website?" And I thought, "Oh, okay, that's a good idea." And so that now, 10 years on, our main revenue comes from the big end of town. So that is, banks, telcos, finance companies, all of the tech people, all of those sort of companies basically fund our business or the bulk of our business. And it actually feels very good. I mean, obviously the ad revenue model is a shifting kind of sand all the time. It's changing, but we've been very successful with it over the years that we've done it. It's going very well. We have an extremely good agency that look after us very well. And our community are totally fine with it because it's, ads are kind of around the edges. They are relevant ads. We don't bombard in any way, shape or form. In fact, we're paranoid about upsetting people with ads. So we turn down an awful lot of stuff because we just, we're very respectful of our community. But it makes us feel a little bit like sort of Robin Hood, kind of steal from the rich and give to the poor. But so, yeah, that's kind of how that's worked, is that gradually Flying Solo has turned into, more of this kind of serious business for us. Initially, it was something that was totally kind of passion and led, as opposed to necessarily looking at it as a revenue source. Sam and I both loved writing, and then Peter joined us, and he's a writer as well. And it was very much, we just want to do this and do this alongside our other work. But certainly it's kind of shifted in the last probably 5 years or so that it's just grown. We've got 85,000 members or something now in Australia, and our forums are really busy. Our social channels are busy. So, it's a business that's keeping us delightfully busy, and it's keeping, I think, about 8 families, keeping us all with food on the table. So, it's not that we're making a mozza. That's not what we're out to do. We're fundamentally looking to support people working by themselves. And it so happens that we're making a living from it as well. So it's kind of nice. And
living the lifestyle that you choose.
Yeah, look, it's never quite what you choose, is it? If it was a real choose, I'd just be talking to you from my island at the moment. But it's pretty good. And we love what we do. We hold ourselves, very much accountable to each other, particularly the three of us that run the business. So Sam and Peter are my business partners now. And we very much, kind of keep ourselves honest and talk about what it is that we're doing, what's keeping us awake at nights, what's going right, what isn't going right. And we constantly adjust and twiddle and tweak and make sure that we're enjoying what we do, because it's only if we can really ourselves run nice, enjoyable solo businesses that we can really expect to be helping others do the same. So it's very important that we keep ourselves in as good a shape as possible.
What I like about your story, Robert, is that it's a business built on content. You started the book and the portal and the blog, and from that you've grown a genuine business. Now, I'm really curious, what impact has social media had along the way? Because, of course, social media also didn't exist when you started.
No, that's right.
Burst onto the scene in 2007, 2006. What impact has that had on your business and your content?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, it's given me a few sleepless nights. I mean, I've got over it now. But when it first started, when Facebook first started to kind of impact, it was quite confusing for a lot of us that were in the kind of community publishing space, because it was suddenly, what's happening here? Here's this person, this Mr. Zuckerberg, who's basically trying to kind of pinch our audience and expecting us to publish our content over there when we have no data on who those people are and we can't control things. He owns all the data. For someone like us, where we were an ad revenue or ad revenue led business, suddenly Mr. Zuckerberg and his crew are running the ads, not us. So it caused us a bit of, I think, confusion. There's lots of chatter around the internet from people in similar spaces to us thinking, what the hell do we do here? What the hell do we do here? And for a while we were, in hindsight, a little sort of old-fashioned and slow. And we just thought, oh, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to get involved in Facebook. We're not going to use discuss comments because, we don't know who those people are that are logging in. So we were a bit sort of old school for a while. And then, of course, it dawned on us that actually, no, this wasn't going to go away anytime soon. This was here forever. So we fully embraced social media. And now I would say, look, between you and me and whoever else is listening, when I go to sleep at night, I wish I'd wake up and it had all disappeared. Social media, but that's not going to happen. So we embrace it fully now. We have a vibrant Facebook community thanks to Kelly, our wonderful editor. And we're pretty active across other social channels. Facebook is certainly, I would say, our kind of social heartland. It's a pretty damn fine place for a lot of people working by themselves to stay connected. There's no doubt about it. And we know from research that we've done with our audience that that's how a lot of solo businesses use Facebook to stay in touch and to stay connected and to just get a bit of reassurance that, maybe everybody's a bit weird as well. So we now use it in a good way, I would say. We use it as we have a strong sort of company page. I forget exactly how many people we have on Facebook now, but it's 35,000, I think, or something. And we use it well and we get good commentary there. And, Facebook is a reasonably strong referrer then back to our main site. So I think increasingly, the way you have to view these things is go where the people are. And this is often, I was talking at a business banking conference a couple of weeks ago about communities and how to access communities. And it still amazes me that a lot of the big end of town are still trying to build and I can see why they're doing it, but they're trying to build their own little sort of fiefdoms around their own brands and then wondering why it's such a struggle. And, I think the reason is because, as I say to them, to go where the people already are. We don't need to all concentrate on trying to create our own sort of community bases when the communities already exist. We're very fortunate that when we launched our forums in 2008, Facebook really didn't have an awful lot of traction then. By the time we launched our forums, there were so many people within our community that were trying to talk to each other. And we were sort of forcing them to try and have discussions on article comments, which was just woeful. It's not the right medium at all. So by the time we opened our forums, they went from, nothing to busy within 2 or 3 weeks, which if you've looked around at forums is not the usual story. Usually when forums start, and people still use forums, and so they should because they can be extremely good. But a lot of forums, the majority of forums, don't succeed. And we've seen people in the small business space in Australia having a go at forums. Just thus far, no one's managed it, simply because it's very hard to get people over there. So we were lucky that people were already there. They were just didn't, it's like they were sort of pushing to get into the lounge room in a pub. And then we eventually opened the doors and let them in. But so our forums are still extremely active. It's quite interesting. There's a very different sort of vibe in our forums to the sort of discussions that you get on Facebook. Facebook are much sort of shorter and sharper and in some ways just sort of a bit more kind of upbeat and, just thinner, if you like, I suppose. They're not in-depth conversations, whereas the forums tend to be detailed conversations. Often we're getting people, not terribly often, but quite regularly we get people that have got a real issue or a struggle and they come into the forums and have a detailed conversation with a lot of extraordinarily generous people who really help them. So the depth of conversation in forums is quite wonderful. It's also occasionally, quite a scary space to be because people will come in and say, hey, can you give me some feedback on my website? And boy, oh boy, do they get it, and that is, you've got to have fairly hard skin, but the generosity and the depth of response from people in our forum community is just nothing short of amazing. So anyway, I've forgotten what the question was.
No, you've answered it well. You said there, go where the people are, and that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
And of course, most people, virtually everybody these days has at least one email address. Yeah. So my question is, what role does the humble old email have with flying solo?
Oh, well, look, there's no doubt about it that the email address is still one of the most sort of valuable bits of currency that as a business owner you can get your hands on. If you can get permission to talk to somebody via email, that I think is extremely valuable. So we have never been sort of overt with our email strategies in that we don't have autoresponders set up or anything like that. We don't send 100% sort of promotional emails to our database. So you'll never get, kind of special offers type emails from us that are basically paid for by a brand. We don't do that. We tried to do it once. And 12 people complained, and we all just hid under our desks and were so upset that we'd upset 12 people that we just have never done it again, much to the chagrin of our ad agency. But anyway, so we're very respectful with our emails. We send 2 emails a week to our community. I think we have 34,000 subscribers or thereabouts. And we certainly have, calls to action for people to subscribe to our newsletter. And we could be much, much more pushy and overt about it than we are. But you know what? That's just not who we are. So what the hell? We try and do it in a way that feels right for us. We do it in a way that, when we read the emails ourselves, we make them emails that we'd be happy to receive ourselves. So to answer your question, though, yes, I think email addresses are extremely valuable. I mean, when I started out working by myself, I had, when I was working, this is before I'd met Sam, before I worked with anyone, I had to get from email addresses by myself. And that was just, my coaching business, I could just send an email out on a Tuesday saying, I've got room for 2 more coaching clients starting next week. If you're, between the ages of 35 and 42 and you've been running a business for between 1 and 3 years and you're looking to achieve X, Y, and Z, maybe give me a buzz. So I'd be very specific. I put in exactly who I was looking for. And every time I did that, I got exactly what I wanted. Now, how good's that? That's not quite so easy these days. But that's certainly how I started out using emails. When I went and did all my talks, and I was presenting probably twice a week to small business groups. On the back of I had a handout at the back of every talk, and on the back of that was a Post-it note. And I said, before you go, please write your email address on the back there if you'd like to receive my newsletter. I'll send it to you. 90% of people put their email address on it because newsletters were new in those days. Wow, he's got a newsletter. But, those times change. But so every week I'd end up on a Friday with a wad of Post-it notes with email addresses, and I'd sit there and manually type them out myself. Or eventually I realized that a virtual assistant could do it a little bit better than I could. But, I built my email address initially very much, one-on-one, very individually. And so I think I still remember that, and I still value for that reason an email address. Really, really value it.
I think the fact that you were collecting email addresses via your public speaking, I think that's such an overlooked area, particularly with people that speak to audiences quite regularly, like you say you were doing and continue to do, that, especially once people have seen you and heard you and spoken with you, to then take that relationship over to email, it's a very deep relationship, I think, to be starting off. And obviously it seems to have worked really well for you.
Yeah, it did and it does. I mean, to this day, I'll still use often a sort of an equivalent of that. And it still surprises me when I see people out there, particularly in sort of newish businesses where they're looking to grow an audience, that will at the end of a presentation sort of say, and there's my web address on the slide, please come and visit. Well, that's a big leap to expect somebody sitting in a room away from their computers. I mean, okay, yes, they might have smartphones with them, but they're away from their desk. And you're asking them to remember a www something, something, something address and to go leave the auditorium, go back to their offices and remember to type that in. It's not going to happen. Whereas when you've got 40, 20, 30, 500 people in a room and you say, hey, if you've enjoyed what I've spoken about today, if you'd like to learn more, if you'd like my templates, if you'd like my worksheets, please just pop your email address on the Post-it note and stick it on your chair and just walk out the room. That works. It still works. And I just loved it. And every time I did a presentation, I walked around and I just pick email addresses off of Post-it notes stuck on chairs and tables. It was fantastic. And it still works. And it still amazes me when people, I think often, particularly people that are kind of novices in this area and maybe starting out doing presenting, but they're so happy that they get to the end of their talk. It's like, thank God it's all over. I can sit down now. And so it's quite a lame sort of call to action at the end. And you just can't expect people to go back to their desks and remember. Because by the time they get back, they've had 5 more emails come in, they've had 2 phone calls, and your history. You're gone. So it's getting it at that moment is so important.
I love it. Now, Robert, what are some things that haven't worked so well over your flying solo journey? Some things that either failed, some things that either you thought were going to go really well but flopped, or maybe just some completely unexpected results along the way.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I think it must just be me that failures, I don't sit on them. They tend to go through my mind and disappear quite rapidly. So I can't remember many things that failed. I honestly can't. I will try and think a bit more. I suppose we did we did a couple of things. When we first started, we were initially sort of selling small ad spaces to individuals. So if you were a solo business owner, you could promote your business on our site. And it sounds like a no-brainer. You'd think, well, yeah, that's a good idea. You've got a community of solo businesses. A lot of solo businesses work with other solo businesses. Why wouldn't you put a little ad on there? And why wouldn't people do that? Now, the reason it doesn't work, unfortunately, is the majority of people actually don't really fully grasp how advertising works. And, you would know, and many of your listeners will know, that advertising works really by having an effective message that is repeated and through repetition becomes something that someone takes notice of. And if it's well written and the proposition is right, then people will, take action from the repetition of seeing a message. But unfortunately, how people who don't really get advertising works is they'll go, right, okay, so this website has, 5,000 people a day. I'll stick one ad on there and I'll get, how many? 5,000? I must get at least 500 people who will come to my business. So it was unrealistic. And try as hard as we might to let people know that you've got to be realistic here. If you put an ad in front of 5,000 people, you might get 1% of people that are looking at it. You might get, 1 in 5 of them that actually click on it. And you might get 1 in 5 of them that actually do anything. And I'm making those numbers up. But what I'm saying is the incidence of action is much smaller than most people think. However, if you do it over a period of time and you repeat it, this is where Google remarketing can be so wonderful. Then people might eventually go, maybe I should take a little look at that. But anyway, so what was happening when we were selling them directly is, of course, what people would do. They go, well, I'll give it a go. I'll buy one ad.
Right.
But I won't get a designer to do it because I can do it myself in Word and it'll look fine. And I won't worry about a writer because I know what's exciting about what I do. So, of course, and then what happens is, because we don't like taking people's money if it doesn't work, we would say, no, that's not going to work. Let's rewrite it for you and let's do this. So we sort of try and fix things up, and it all just ended up as it just didn't work. So we kind of biffed that a while ago. Unfortunately, Google a little while later came up with Google Ads, and that was perfect because people could have a really closely targeted ad. They could, write their sort of mediocre copy and see very clearly that it doesn't work. They had the sort of the backing, which we never had. We didn't put any sort of developmental money into creating anything as big as Google. Surprise, surprise. But Google Ads were, so in the end, we found ourselves saying, for God's sake, don't spend the money with us. Go and buy some Google Ads, because that way you can learn and it'll cost you a lot less and, you'll pick up some skills on the way. So that I guess, would be something that we might say didn't work. But apart from that, there's been little things here and there, I guess, that we've done. We've this year, we've actually decided to pull back very slightly on some of our social activity just because it was filling up too much time. And, everyone listening would know that, showing up well to your Facebook community has changed a lot in a few years. The algorithms are changing. Facebook, of course, is trying to nudge us into spending more money on advertising and doing things. And we've just had to weigh these up and go, you know what? That's not actually, if we've got, if our editor's got an hour to spend, should she spend it on Facebook or should she spend it on writing, on, fine tuning copy even more or finding an even better contributor? And we realize that the latter is where we want to be. It's not that we just want to spread stuff. We want to spread good stuff. So it's the quality is more important really to us than the kind of the reach, if that makes sense. So that's something that we kind of constantly adjusting and looking and you have to these days. Something that works this week doesn't mean it's going to work next week. So we're constantly looking. Live events is something else that we used to do a lot of and very successfully. We had a big sort of annual conference that we ran for 4 years, 350 people, never ever discounted a ticket sale, and had sort of 12 or so speakers. Fantastic. But we pulled out of that purely because it just gobbled up too much time, and it was turning us into an event business, and that's not what we want to be. So we may well come back into events in some way, shape or form. I mean, we kind of love to in many ways. But, we've got to keep aware all the time of what do we do best, and where can we, most support our community. So we try to stop looking at things from a sort of revenue perspective so much, and instead look at, okay, what's this going to do for somebody? Is this beneficial? Is this helping them in their business? And brackets, can that contribute to our business as well? So it's a constant juggle, but it's something that we all enjoy, and we're all led by a sort of a very clear set of values. The sort of 8 of us that work in the business, we get on extremely well. We've, no one's ever left. Actually, one person, Jodie, left when she had a baby, but no one else has, and we just love it. So that's what drives us.
That's fantastic, Robert. And how can listeners find out more about you and your community at Flying Solo?
Well, the best way, and this is, I'm not going to ask for any email addresses or anything. The best way is simply, please just come along and look at us. Just come along to flyingsolo.com.au, have a look at what we do. You mentioned earlier, I think I do a podcast. I record one every couple of weeks, all on the subject of sort of lifestyle businesses and looking at people that are doing it and doing it well. Please come and have a look at our forums. If you would like to talk about your business, tell people what you do, be seen to be helping other people, forums are a great place to be. Have a little look, spend a bit of time there, have a good read of our guidelines. Just come and see what we're up to. That's what I'd love.
Wonderful. And is there any final piece of advice or anything you'd like to get off your chest that I haven't given you an opportunity to do so yet?
Not particularly. Look, I think I would just end with a little quote that I love and I still use. You talk about solo businesses, talk about working by yourself. And I'm sure a number of your listeners would be people that work possibly by themselves or in a very small group. And mine is just a quote that I often refer back to, which is, the time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time. So I think in this day and age where everything's so goddamn busy and rushed, just remember that it's important to take a bit of time out and give yourself time to think, give yourself time to contemplate. Don't worry that it might not for that moment be contributing to your business. It will be contributing to your soul, and that will help your business.
I love that quote a lot. Okay, Robert, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
Catch you later.
Okay, mate. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for my chat with Robert Gerrish.
And what was one of the take-homes for you, Ads?
Look, I was really fascinated by his take on social media, because when it first came out, well, I guess because he had the forum, because he already had like this big online community of people, when Facebook came out, it was all of a sudden a threat, like because Facebook wants you to have your community on Facebook's platform. And the fact is he already had an online membership site and a huge platform with a whole lot of members. So it was interesting that at first he just wished it would go away, but then realized, hang on, we can work with this, we can make this work for us and still have a Facebook community, still have content being published there, and actually still have the more premium membership site with the forum and everything on his site. And I think oftentimes you'll hear from people that say, geez, forums are hard work, it's hard to get traction, there's so many barriers because people have to log in and it's not a site they visit necessarily every day, so it's not in their daily routine. Whereas Facebook, for example, typically people look at least once a day, probably many more times than that. So I think because Robert had actually started so much earlier than Facebook came along, he already had established that momentum and traction with his forum. Whereas I think now, I know there's some people that do it well. Previous guests on the show like James Schramko and I think Dan Norris as well have had success with forums over the years. Definitely James Schramko is a very big advocate for it. But I think it would certainly have its challenges building one from scratch these days when you do have such, I guess, magnetic communities or platforms like Facebook. So anyway, that was one of the interesting things from the chat, embracing social media, even though at the start it might have seemed like a bit of a threat.
It's a common question really for a lot of people we talk to, isn't it?
Yeah, often it's, why do I need to bother with social media? why do I need to waste time on there? Do I need to spend time on there? What am I actually doing over there? I thought all the action should happen on the website. So no, it is a common discussion point, and it's certainly one of those things that just needs to be weighed up in each particular person's situation. But I'm very surprised if people can't find a decent use for social media. I certainly don't think everything should happen over there. It should definitely be used with a view to getting people off social media and onto your website and onto your email list and having that much more meaningful relationship via email. At least that's my 2 cents, TJ.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the difference between someone else's platform and building your own, isn't it? So It's always a debate.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so as always, our intent with these interviews and our own shows is to deliver actionable advice. Your feedback and questions are always welcome. You can reach us both via email, toby.jenkins@bluewiremedia.com.au, and mine is adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au. And if you enjoyed the show, and I hope you did, Tobes and I would absolutely love it if you could take 60 seconds now to leave us a review or rating on iTunes. I'm just going to give a shout out to Liam O'Neill from Angry Ant Web, who left us a recent review that says, "So much value, thank you, 5 stars." And he said, "You guys practice what you preach. You offer so much value and associate yourselves with great people. Makes me want to associate with you." Many thanks from a regional Australian web agency that uses your podcast to listen to industry leaders. Thanks for the tips and motivation to continue to improve. So thanks, Liam. That's very kind of you. If you leave us a review on iTunes, we will hopefully be able to give you a shout out sometime soon. So Tobes, with that, I think that is a day, unless you've got anything to add.
Yeah, no, that sounds great, mate.
All right,
Well done again.
We'll see you on the next show.
Sounds good.